What's up, Taiwan? I'm Yvonne with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. The American Chamber of Commerce in Taiwan has released its latest white paper urging action on tariffs, security cooperation, and more political interaction. Reporter Chris Gorin was at the release of the white paper in Taipei and spoke with the Chamber's new president about what companies want from both governments.
American and Taiwanese businesses want stronger economic, political, and defense ties between Taiwan and the United States. That's according to a new white paper from the American Chamber of Commerce in Taiwan, which represents several of those companies. They're calling for a reduction in U.S. tariffs on Taiwan and the elimination of double taxation in the two countries. They're also calling for bolstered defense support for Taiwan in the face of what they call Chinese military expansion. And they want more cabinet-level U.S. officials to visit Taiwan, as well as support for Taiwan's participation in international organizations. This is the first white paper released under the new AmCham president, Carl Wegner. I spoke with him about some of the Chamber's new priorities. So the Chamber has called for a reduction in tariffs on Taiwanese products. How do you think that U.S. tariffs on Taiwanese products harm American interests?
I think our position on the white paper is not directly on that. It's a position per industry, right? We have 500 companies, 25 committees, and they've all come with slightly different comments on what could be doing to help their industry. Tariffs in general are one way of negotiating between countries. I think from the AmCham point of view, Taiwan should be seen as not an adversarial relationship and should be as an ally. And as we see these tariff discussions continue, we hope that we see them making progress, but they come out with a good solution that continues to support the continued business between Taiwan and the U.S., continued investment of Taiwan into the U.S.
So just to be clear, the Chamber would like to see an end to the tariffs on Taiwanese products?
I think we want to see, we'd like to see that a reduction, obviously. To a fair point where both sides can agree to continue to collaborate and invest in each other.
Also in the defense portion, as part of bolstering Taiwan's defense, the Chamber calls for Taiwanese companies to be integrated into the U.S. defense supply chain. So do you think that Taiwanese and U.S. businesses have a role to play in deterrence?
In terms of building materials, in terms of building services and products that build deterrence, absolutely. I think that Taiwan has proved for decades Taiwan inside is the OEM side of things is there, and now that the U.S. is looking toward a non-red supply chain, I think Taiwan has a tremendous opportunity to facilitate that, to provide some of those goods, to make sure that fulfilling that goal of non-red and building more relationships and business between Taiwanese and American companies.
The white paper calls for more cabinet-level visits from U.S. officials to Taiwan. Is there any ceiling to the kinds of officials you'd like to see in Taiwan? Would the Chamber support, for example, a visit from the U.S. Secretary of State?
It's not up to us to decide. I think that the more higher-level visits that come, the better. Right? I think it shows a commitment to Taiwan, communication to Taiwan. And having those type of bilateral visits used to be a common thing, right? They stopped because of other issues, right? So we're just trying to restore them. We're not trying to change anything. Or from our opinion, we're not encouraging any change. We're just bringing them back to the norm.
With a new president at the helm, AmCham says it's focused on improving U.S.-Taiwan relations and making sure the voices of its member companies are heard. Brian Wu, IT, and Chris Gorin in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
In the face of growing threats from China, Taiwan's opposition-held legislature has passed a bill that increases pay for the country's volunteer armed forces. Leslie Liao has more.
Taiwan's volunteer military personnel are getting a pay bump. Lawmakers have passed an amendment boosting their monthly allowance to $1,000 US. The increase is expected to take effect next year. At a time when Taiwan's military is being tested by China, which sends warplanes and naval vessels close to the country on a near-daily basis, both ruling and opposition lawmakers seem to agree that Taiwan's defenders deserve more.
国军弟兄24小时保家卫国，待遇应该合理适度的调升。
人才守得住，国防才守得住。
The pay increase comes amid high turnover and low recruitment among Taiwan's ranks. Lawmakers say that the new law is meant to address these issues.
因为过去这几年可以清楚地看得出来，在不适服，也就是不愿意继续担任最重要最高的比例，薪水是里面的重中之重。
But the amendment's passage was not without controversy. Taiwan's main opposition Kuomintang holds the legislature along with the smaller Taiwan People's Party. And together, the two parties' lawmakers can steamroll their ruling party counterparts in the chamber. But the bill sparked an unusual dispute between the KMT and the TPP on whether the pay raise should be the same across all ranks. The ruling Democratic Progressive Party also clashed with the opposition over the raises, not on content, but on procedure. Even though the legislature controls the country's budget, Premier Zhuo Rongtai says that when it comes to proposals that would vastly increase government spending, the legislature would need to consult his cabinet first, something he said opposition lawmakers have not done.
预算法91条明文的写到，地法院用法律案大幅增加中央政府税出的时候，一定要跟行政院来征询，行政院绝对依照宪政的精神提出救济。
While there's broad consensus that Taiwan's armed forces deserve higher pay, opinions differ on how raises should be implemented and how much should be offered. The debate isn't limited to the two main ruling and opposition parties. Each of the legislature's three major players bring their own perspectives to the table. John Su and Leslie Liao for TaiwanPlus.
Japan says two of China's aircraft carriers conducted simultaneous drills in the Pacific for the first time. Foreign Minister Iwaya Takeshi says Tokyo has communicated its concerns to Beijing about the presence of the carriers Liaoning and Shandong near Japan. The Liaoning has been conducting exercises near Japan since late May, while the Shandong was seen in the Pacific on June 7th. China's Navy says deploying the carriers is part of routine training drills and does not target any country. Prosecutors have charged 4 former staffers of the ruling Democratic Progressive Party with leaking classified national security information to China. The 4 include a former consultant in President Lai Ching-te's office and a former aide to National Security Council head Joseph Wu during his time as foreign minister. They were allegedly approached by the other 2 defendants who were recruited by China in 2017 and received more than $280,000 in payments. Prosecutors are asking for sentences of between 5 and more than 18 years for the 4 defendants. U.S. President Donald Trump is doubling the number of National Guard troops and sending 700 Marines to Los Angeles as protests against his crackdown on immigration escalate. Easy Wells reports.
These protesters in Los Angeles are set to face another 2,000 National Guard troops and 700 Marines deployed by the Trump administration after protests broke out against immigration raids on Friday. The decision announced on X by U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth marks another escalation in President Donald Trump's response to protesters across the country who say their communities are being ripped apart.
I'm here with my friends, but I see a lot of strangers with very similar faces, very similar features to where we come from in Latin America. We're all indigenous, and it makes me tear up because I see all of them with so much life. They're fighting to keep their families together and to keep the community and the indigenous people together.
Trump's decision to federalize the National Guard and deploy active duty troops has been met with fierce criticism from California's Governor Gavin Newsom and from Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, who has called for an end to the immigration raids.
We need to stop the raids. This should not be happening in our city. It is not warranted, and the only thing it does is contribute to chaos. This was chaos that was started at Washington, D.C. On Thursday, the city was peaceful. On Friday, it was not because of the intervention of the federal government.
Newsom says he will be suing the Trump administration over the deployment of the National Guard, but Trump has defended his decision, blaming the governor for the unrest.
He's an incompetent governor. Look at the job he's doing in California. He's destroying one of our great states. And if I didn't get involved, if we didn't bring the Guard in, and we would bring more in if we needed it, because we have to make sure there's going to be law and order.
As protests entered the fourth straight day on Monday, rubber bullets and clashes continue to fill the streets of LA. And despite pleas from local officials, the deployment of even more troops means Trump is willing to escalate the confrontation above the heads of city and state authorities. Joseph Wu and Izzy Wells for TaiwanPlus.
3 decades ago, then Taiwan President Teng-Hui made a speech in the United States that sparked a crisis in cross-strait relations. Cadence Quaranta looks back on that time.
Fellow alumni, ladies and gentlemen.
A simple opening to a speech that would have major consequences from Taiwan's then president, Teng-Hui. 30 years ago, that speech sparked tensions between the U.S. and China and a crisis in cross-strait relations.
It has been a long and challenging journey with many bumps in the road. Yet my wife and I are indeed very happy to return to this beloved campus.
In 1995, Lee was granted a visa for a supposedly private visit to Cornell University, his alma mater, becoming the first Taiwan president to ever visit the U.S. The trip broke long-standing diplomatic precedent, with no high-ranking Taiwan officials allowed into the U.S. for many years, after the U.S. had severed official diplomatic ties with Taiwan, switching recognition to China in 1979. Washington established its One China policy, recognizing the People's Republic of China as the sole legal Chinese government, and acknowledging the Chinese position that Taiwan is a part of China. Despite the visit being unofficial, in his speech, Lee said Taiwanese people were not happy with the country's international status, and also spoke about China, calling for a, quote, end to ideological confrontation. And China did not look kindly on the visit.
美国允许登会访美，对中美关系所产生的潜在的影响应该是很严重的。那么这些不利的因素会影响今后双边关系的发展。
Following the visit, China recalled its ambassador to the U.S., launched missiles near Taiwan, amassed troops on its southeastern coast, and conducted large-scale military exercises, beginning what is known as the Third Taiwan Strait crisis. Amid the tensions, U.S. officials reaffirmed their commitment to the One China policy.
We acknowledge the Chinese position that there is but one China and that Taiwan is part of China. We reaffirm that we have no intention of advocating or supporting a policy of two Chinas or one China, one Taiwan.
But they also defended the decision to allow Lee's visit.
One of the basic tenets of this country is that we allow people the opportunity to speak. And that's what we did in this instance. I hope they'll recognize the importance of how deeply we believe in that right and that we can go on from here. The Chinese always ask us to consider their views in terms of cultural differences. We would hope they would consider ours.
While the crisis eventually de-escalated in 1996, it is still regarded as a notable moment in cross-strait relations. 3 decades on, tensions across the strait remain high, with no signs of improvement anytime soon. Scott Huang and Cadence Quaranta for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, check out this street art exhibition in Paris. I'm Yvonne Yang. Take care, and I'll see you next time.